All right, good morning, Bismarck Mandan. Dave Flohr, one of the experts, along with
Greg Larson,
another expert.
one of the little spurts.
Oh,
Just nothing.
I have no
got
idea what that
nothing for you.
means.
I don't either.
Okay, and then we have a real expert as a guest today.
Yes, indeed.
Jennifer Henderson from North Dakota Housing Finance Agency. That's where I work, too, you know.
I'd heard that.
Did you?
Well,
Yeah.
I asked them, how long you worked there, and they said ever since we threatened to fire him. So
Yeah. Hey, there you go. Thank you, Greg, for that. Okay. And as always, Jim. Say hi, Jim.
Hi, Jim.
On the board. All right. And
Happy 4th.
Happy pre-4th holiday weekend or whatever. Yeah, okay.
My favorite time of year.
All right. And it's a cool day today.
Yeah,
And
nice
it
day.
sounds like a nice weekend coming
70s.
up. 80.
Might get some rain on Saturday.
Okay.
We're going to cross our fingers.
All right. Okay. We can live with that. A little rain. All right. Okay. Let's talk interest rates, Greg.
let's do that.
We always do that, Okay. So what did rates do this week? Well, I'm going to tell you.
We have intense motion on the rates, do we?
Well, let's find out.
Okay.
Okay. The Freddie Mac survey ending this week, today, actually. The 30-year fixed-rate mortgage averaged 3.48%. That's down from last week when it averaged 3.56. So we did have some movement.
Wow.
Yeah. Brexit,
Yeah.
those Britain people, they exited and the mortgage rates exited downward.
They all said,
that's a good deal.
cheerio.
So they said cheerio, and our rates went south also. A year ago at this time, the 30-year fixed rate was 4.08%. The 15-year averaged 2.78% this week, down from last week on an average 2.83. So let's see, what did the ARMs do? The 5-year ARM averaged 2.7 this week, down from last week when it was at 2.74. So really get a fixed mortgage, I think.
Yeah,
would
really.
be
What's the
a
advantage?
Good plan. Yeah, there's not much difference there. And let's see, what does our friend Barry Habib at MBS Highway say today? He says float on your locks. So unless you're got to definitely do it, just give it a little more time. Might go down some more. Good jobless claims report this morning. Looks good that there'll be a good jobs report next week. The Fed probably is not going to do anything with interest rates now for they don't know when. Certainly not July. Probably not till November at the earliest. All because of the British again.
Brexit.
They keep rates low. Anyway, okay. So, Greg, we're waiting with breathless anticipation because I bet you have
Some
a trivia.
Trivia?
thing for
Well,
us.
we're talking Brexit, right?
Oh, it's Brexit.
Big deal. The English have revolted and left the EU.
That,
We're
no,
revolting.
they're
Is that-
the ones
is
revolting
that-
instead of us.
All right.
That's okay.
On this day,
Okay.
June 30th, 1775, we had the US Brexit.
The us Brexit.
Yep,
Okay.
it's when the colonial government adopted articles of war and officially left the British.
All right. Good for us. It turned out okay.
Yes.
It worked for us, and if the Brits can wait for 260 years, it'll work for them too.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it might take them that long to actually get out of the EU. I don't know. Although I think the rest of the EU countries want them out now. Is if you voted for it, you're out.
It's kind of should I stay or should I go?
Yeah.
Yeah,
We did that
exactly.
last
We did
week.
that
Yes,
last
we
week
did.
with the clash.
I knew I'd
God
heard
save
it.
the Queen.
I knew
She's
I'd
not
heard
even
it somewhere.
Did you see the he was a former mayor of London. He was the guy that kind of led the Leave vote. He wanted
Boris.
They thought Boris, yes.
Boris Johnson.
They thought he would be the guy to take over from Cameron and be prime minister, and he said no today.
Yeah,
So now everything's in chaos again. So
kind of like Trump's VP boys. No, not me.
Yeah.
Not me.
not me.
That'd be-
Yeah.
that'd be-
You think he'll get a vice president?
Sure.
Okay,
course.
somebody will run.
It'll be someone who said, not me, and they'll say, oh, okay, sure.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Okay. All right. That'll be interesting choice. When is the convention?
Sometime in August. I don't even know.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the Democratic convention, is it
The
before?
week later.
It's a week after. Okay. All right. So Hillary's going to try and trump
Okay.
the week after. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. With bigger news on. Do they announce their vice president candidate before the
Kind of
convention
varies.
normally?
Generally at the convention is when they
Generally,
make
yeah.
it official.
As a rule at the convention.
So they can build some tension and watch.
Yeah.
If your presidential nominee or gubernatorial nominee, whatever in these conventions is pretty much a given, then they try to build the tension in some of the other races.
Okay. All right. Okay.
This year in the Republican convention and following campaigns, it was exciting enough. We didn't have to worry about who the
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Other
All right.
folks
Well,
will be.
it is the Dakota Housing Network. It's not
It
the
is.
Dakota Political Network.
That's right.
So we should probably stop talking about politics.
All right, then
Okay.
let's talk about
Let's-
1953 on this day.
Okay.
Yeah.
He's got more.
A very
trivia,
important
folks.
thing happened.
Okay.
A
All right.
very important
Okay.
thing happened.
All right.
On this day in 1953, the first Corvette rolled off the assembly line.
Woo!
Okay. And that has what to do with housing?
If you can afford a Corvette, you can buy
For
a house.
Okay. And put it in your garage. Okay. Very
Little red
good.
Corvette.
What a segue we have there. Anyway, okay, we do have a guest in the studio this morning, Jennifer Henderson from North Dakota Housing Finance Agency. She is the Director of Planning and Housing Development.
Hi, guys. Thanks for having me.
I got that right?
You did.
Because I work with you. I should
You
know.
should.
Yeah, I should get that right. Okay. So, Jennifer, we are going to talk about rental housing primarily, multifamily housing, and the state of multifamily housing in North Dakota today.
Can't wait.
Okay. All right. So, do you want to lead off with anything about exactly what you do there? What's your role?
What my role is?
Yeah.
Well, we administer the programs that help to finance affordable housing through the state of North Dakota, and that is federal and state programs. Also, we do participate with rural communities to help address their housing needs, and how can we get development started in those more difficult to develop areas in our state.
Now, what would be a difficult to develop area?
Anything that is under the big five population-wise for communities.
Okay.
So
Okay.
from Steele to Carrington, all the way down to Gwinner, you
So
name it. Yeah,
Anything outside of Grand Forks, Fargo, Bismarck?
you bet
and-
there's going to be
and
some
Minot.
challenges.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Okay. Now, we're going to talk about vacancy trends in the state because, I think that's something that everybody's probably pretty aware of, and we'll get into this when we come back from the break. But certainly people are probably aware. They hear, it's been overbuilt in western North Dakota in particular, and that's probably true to some extent with certain types of housing.
That's correct.
And certainly motels have probably been overbuilt. But in other parts of the state, that's not really the case because we do have some problems in other parts of the state where there is still not enough housing available. So we will get into that when we come back, and we're doing the patriotic theme. Jim's cranking up the 4th of July music, starting off with, The Boss, Bruce Springsteen.
Why not?
All right.
Right Now 64.
Here's Sean Hannity, weekday afternoons on Super Talk 1270.
Are we back?
We're
back.
back.
We're back. Yay.
Hey, Dave Flohr, Greg Larson on the Dakota Housing Network with our guest, Jennifer Henderson from North Dakota Housing. And a little Saturday in the Park with Chicago.
Yeah, 4th of July music.
You bet. Absolutely. I think Chicago just got inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame this year, right?
They were.
Or was it?
Yeah, I think. Did they?
They got
Just recently,
something.
Yeah.
Because there was a big
I think it was this
controversy
year.
about that.
Yeah, I can't remember. I think it was this
I'll
year.
look it up.
Anyway. Okay, Jim will look that up.
There's a lot more
Google it.
controversy
So
about
it's-
them getting in than me getting in.
Yeah.
Well, what are your credentials,
And my
Greg?
credentials are not in ever.
Okay, all right, okay. Okay, well, no, we're waiting with breathless anticipation for the next bout
Well,
of
we were just
trivia.
going to talk about Mike Tyson.
Mike Tyson.
Mike Tyson. Today
Okay.
is his 50th birthday.
Wow.
There may be a cake. It looks like a big earlobe.
We were talking about Tyson's little tour into cannibalism there with Evander
Yes,
Holyfield.
yes, he did.
I got to just tell you, and I would never tell this to his face. This guy has got a blender going on in his brain.
Okay.
Or it's been blended a few
It's
times.
It's been
Blended.
blended a few times.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
By many things.
True story.
Okay.
I used to build churches all over the United States.
Yep.
And I built one in Poughkeepsie, New York.
Okay.
It was Beulah Baptist, and it was a great experience there. But right in front of where Beulah Baptist was being built was Poughkeepsie Avenue.
Okay.
And at the end of Poughkeepsie Avenue, on the east side, was the, I can't remember the name of it, but it was a gym where Mike Tyson trained.
Oh, okay.
And Mike lived up north in a town called Whitefish. No,
Okay.
that's Montana. White
White
something.
something. Okay.
Yeah.
And you could hear him coming down in his Lamborghini,
Oh,
coming down the highway that ran along the river and hitting this exit.
Okay.
And then it's always at about 9 o'clock in the morning. You could hear this exit, and then hear this engine just screaming, coming up Poughkeepsie Avenue.
Mm-hmm.
And pretty soon here would come this black Lamborghini at about between 90 and 100 miles an hour. Woo! Shoo! Down the street to that gym. That was Iron Mike.
Iron Mike. Well, there's your.
I waved once. I hoped he didn't take his hands off the wheel to wave back.
Yeah. Okay. Now I'd like to know if you can spell Poughkeepsie.
Poughkeepsie.
Very good. Okay. All right. Now we have that settled. All right. Let's talk about housing. We have Jennifer.
I can
Henderson.
go home now.
Yeah. Jennifer Henderson from North Dakota Housing, the Planning and Housing Development Director there. Jennifer, we're going to talk about vacancies in North Dakota. So
Vacancies, yes.
Is it just all going to pot? I mean, is every place like vacant and everybody's left the state and all that, or what's going on?
I wouldn't say that to be the case.
Okay.
Every market's going to be a little bit different and have its challenges, but vacancy is a difficult number to track because there isn't one agency at this time in our state who is tracking vacancies in the rental units throughout the entire state. So we can kind of piece together some vacancy information. For example, Bismarck-Mandan, the Bismarck-Mandan Development Corporation is tracking vacancies with the help of North Dakota Guarantee and Title. And on a quarterly basis, they release information, and it is divided between apartments that were built pre-2010 and then those built after 2010 and two different vacancy rates based on those different time frames. So in this last quarter, the vacancy rate for the pre-2010 was still at 3.5%. The industry standard is 7% vacancy, so well under.
Low.
Yep, for the pre-2010.
Okay.
But post-2010, that does rise a little bit to about 9%. So you'll see that in the apartments that are newer, and in the most recent years, we're seeing a lot more luxury apartments built in the Bismarck-Mandan area, 1,200 square feet and greater, charging rents of $1,400 plus. Those are the ones that are more vacant than those built in 2010, which is what we would consider the more affordable units, those that are renting for $1,000 or less.
So basically, those pre-2010, they've got a lower carrying cost.
Yes.
Because of construction expenses when they built those post-10. So they're able to handle a lower rent. You know, they could afford to lower their rents to attract tenants.
That's correct. But then also, you know, those apartments built prior to 2010 weren't luxury. They were, you know, 2 bedrooms, very modest accommodation because that's the way the apartment market was running at that point. Yeah. You know, now there's more interested in renting, so they're making them more luxurious, and with that comes an increased cost as well.
Yeah, okay. And now, Greg, you had something from locally here about duplexes.
Yeah, this is sales of duplexes, not rental of duplexes.
But sale, assuming those places would probably, or at least one of the units is going to be rented.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. The duplexes are off. I can't remember what I said, but it's like 80%.
80%.
Big
The
percentage
sale of them.
in numbers of units sold.
Yeah.
And the price is off slightly. I'd say it's stable. It's off 1%, which I'd say is pretty stable. You know, from this time last year, we're starting to see an influx in that. But I think that's part of the people that are going to buy a duplex as an investment or a owner-occupied unit are thinking that they're hearing, well, they're discounting these big apartments. I'll never rent mine, and that's just not the case. Those ones will rent. It's the big ones that won't.
Yeah. So really,
it's ticking up. But
do you think there's people that own the duplexes that aren't? Say, well, I'm not going to sell because I've got
there's some of that
3% vacancy rate on.
Yeah, there's some of that. They're hanging on.
I can rent my place in a heartbeat because I don't have to charge $2,000 a month. I can charge $1,000 or less.
And you don't see people discounting their rent rates in duplexes. They're still holding or raising them slightly.
Oh, okay.
Right. So.
Okay, but they were never as high as
and
these
that really
ones.
is a whole different business model than what these 60-unit apartments are.
Yeah. Okay.
This is mom and dad owning 2 or 3 duplex rental units, generally speaking.
Yeah. Okay. So does that hold true? Do you think in the rest of the state where there was a lot of higher end stuff that was built, and that's what's struggling to keep filled, right?
I'm going to say that to be true. You know, in the Minot area, the last number that we got was about a 12% vacancy rate. While in newspaper articles, we're seeing much higher, but in reality, 12% is the last report that I saw. And we have some older federal tax credit projects. They're not running those levels of vacancies. In fact, they're fairly full unless they're extremely aged and need some rehab money into them. But a majority of those vacancies are going to be in the more luxury type apartments. You know, with our housing incentive fund, some of the projects that were built, it was designed to be mixed income, some market rate, some moderate income to the 140% AMI levels, which is, you know, the incomes of, you know, 50,000 plus a year, and then the lower income. Our low income units are fairly full, but the ones that are targeting the more higher income households or the market rate, they're starting to see a little bit more of competition as well. So there's some uptick in those that are not addressing the affordable to the very low income and the extremely low income households.
Okay. So there's plenty of places for rent. It's just that some of them aren't affordable for most people because they were built targeting a different audience completely. And really, so the what would you call more affordable, or what everybody would think would be realistic rents to pay for an apartment, they're full. So that's creating a problem, right?
It is, yeah. I mean, the market is really tight for folks that can't afford over the fair market rents. And a fair market rent in North Dakota is at $844 a month rent. And that is set by HUD. And to be able to afford an apartment, you must earn $15.66 an hour to have that be 30% of your income going towards rent of $814.
Okay, so and 15,000. Well, how does that
$15.66.
Okay, so
an hour, hourly wage. Yeah.
And that's our minimum wage is what here?
$7.55. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. You know, some North Dakota occupations that pay less.
Yeah.
It's
than
significant.
That $15.
Yeah.
What do you got?
Daycare provider, waiter, waitress, bank teller, or some of the few.
Okay. So unless you're got two jobs or a roommate, obviously, it's definitely a struggle.
It would be a struggle.
And to find a place in some, like here in Bismarck, 3% vacancy rate, it's going to be hard to find a place.
Very challenging. Yes.
That's affordable. So that vacancy rate, that's just going to keep those rents up because of that.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's no need to reduce prices when you've got full occupancy.
Greg just alluded to.
Yeah.
You know, these duplex owners they're not lowering their prices. So.
Right.
And then we were talking about like Grand Forks is really very tight out there, right, for a housing market.
From what I've heard, you know, based on conversations, it's one of the cost-burdened cities in the state, one of the highest cost burden. Cost burden means that you're paying more than 30% for housing.
Yeah. So that $15 wage to afford $800 is even
stretching it.
It's a worse situation in Grand Forks because there aren't as many apartments at that price level.
Right.
Yeah.
Do you suppose, Fargo's a big enough community that it can absorb a lot of students, but Grand Forks is significantly smaller, but they have about the same student base, in UND.
Very similar.
Do you suppose the students that are renting apartments affects that?
Definitely. They tighten the market because they're looking for the same types of homes or rental properties that the very low-income households are.
You have a community that's half the size of Fargo with the same student population. Yeah, you're a good point, Greg.
Well, I have a friend from Washburn who has 3 daughters, and they all have, now the last one is going to graduate next year. They bought a condo in Grand Forks, and the kids have just stayed at the condo, and they've had roommates paying the money.
A lot of people do that,
I always wondered if he's going to be able to sell the condo, and I said, rent it.
Yeah, really.
But he can't.
Okay, we got a break.
There we are.
Living in the USA from the Steve Miller Band on this 4th of July weekend. We'll be back on the Dakota Housing Network.
Right now, 64.
Dave Ramsey is heard here. Super Talk 1270.
All right, we are back on the Dakota Housing Network with the Charlie Daniels Band in America. Gotta like that. You don't hear that song very often.
No.
That guy is a serious patriot, too.
He is.
He lives like that.
He does, absolutely. Yep, some great stuff from Charlie. All right, we're back on the Dakota Housing Network. Dave Flohr and Greg Larson with our special guest, Jennifer Henderson
Hi,
from North
Jennifer.
Dakota Housing.
Thank you. Glad
Okay.
to be here.
So, Greg,
Guess what happened
I'm on the
today?
edge of my seat again.
Today,
What's the trivia?
in 1876,
Okay.
today, the Far West steamboat of the Benteen lines started back from the Little Bighorn, carrying survivors'
Uh-oh.
bodies and news of the Battle of the Little Bighorn.
Okay, all right, not good.
Yeah,
Okay.
they started back today.
Please,
Okay.
Mr. Custer.
Yeah, I don't want to go.
Yeah.
Also today,
Okay, all right.
better, happier news, Sandy Koufax pitched his first no-hitter.
Ah,
Yeah.
all right, he was good.
Sandy Koufax in his career pitched 1 perfect game and 5 no-hitters.
Him and Drysdale were the ultimate 1-2 punch
Yeah.
in baseball, I thought.
Yeah, now here you go, baseball fan. What do you suppose Sandy Koufax went to college to play?
I should know this because I read his book, his biography. It was something weird, wasn't it?
Basketball.
Basketball. Okay.
He was a top basketball prospect.
Ah.
No one even looked at him for baseball until they saw him pitching in a pickup game.
Well, that was the
At
deal
the
with
University of
Maris,
Cincinnati.
too, right? Didn't Maris go to school for basketball?
Maris did play basketball.
And he and Sandy were actually close friends.
Yeah,
Okay.
so there you go.
Wow, that's like extra
Oh,
trivia.
I got a
Multi-sport
trivia question
guys.
for you.
Mike Tyson never played basketball.
I'll bet.
Mike Tyson never played basketball. No, great
Foul
trivia
out too
question.
soon.
I heard this from Bob Euchre one time. Remember, I think it was 66 when the Dodgers were in the World Series, and Koufax was scheduled to pitch the opener, and he didn't do it. He couldn't do it. Do you remember why?
Because he's Jewish.
Jewish holiday.
Yep.
Oh, I remember that. Now
Yeah.
that you'd say that, yeah. So one more, since we're
Oh,
being
one more?
patriotic, got to do
Okay.
this. In
All right.
1859, on this day, June 30th, as part of a 4th of July celebration,
Uh-oh.
Jean-Francois Gravella, and I have my wife tell me how to pronounce that.
Okay.
Jean-Francois
Diane
Gravella,
to the rescue.
the Great Blondini.
Oh,
That's
okay.
what he called himself.
Okay.
First man to walk across Niagara Falls on
Oh.
a tightrope.
Oh, interesting.
And it started out a 5-year tour of the United States where he walked between buildings and across
Yeah.
things. And each time he did it. This time he did it straight, but each time he did it
Did something
in
unique
costume
to
or
it.
something unique to it.
Yeah.
And when he walked across, I can't think of it, 2 buildings in New York anyway. Back in 1859, he was dressed as a gorilla. So there you
Oh.
go.
Okay.
That's the Great Blondini.
How do you practice that?
Yeah.
Especially 1859. What kind of costume would you have?
Yeah,
with a
I don't
gorilla?
know. And
I don't
why
know.
would you?
Yeah, and why would you? Yeah. Well, I'm sure it got everybody's attention.
Yep.
Okay, so we are back. Jennifer, before the break, we were talking about affordable rents across the state, and you got some facts on that. So
I'm a
what
fact
do you
girl.
got? You got the facts, girl. What do you got?
Well, we were talking about how the very low and extremely low income households are having a more challenging time finding affordable rents because that market is tighter. And some interesting information is that in North Dakota, 34% of households are cost burdened paying for their housing, which means that they're paying more than 31% towards housing. And even more striking is that 10% of households in North Dakota are extremely low income, meaning that they can only afford approximately $450 or less per month for their housing.
So
That is a market that is difficult to build for and to have available housing.
yeah, you have to move to a small town in North Dakota to find a house, maybe.
Maybe, or maybe an affordable rental property that may have
Yeah.
been built there
Yeah.
by
Yeah.
using rural development programs.
Yeah.
But there's some challenges in those rural communities with those properties. They were built in the 70s and 80s. They're getting aged and need rehab. Well, when rents are $450 or less a month, there isn't a lot of money saved up for any capital expenditures, a new roof and windows, that type of maintenance. So that's one of the challenges that we're looking at for future uses of state funding programs, and trying to get all of our resources together in our state to help deal with some of our aged properties.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the funding resources that are there. We have low-income housing tax credits, which have been around for 30
years this year. Yeah, it's
This
the
year it's
30th
30.
anniversary.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. And then we had the Housing Trust Fund,
The
or the Housing Incentive Fund,
Fund.
excuse
Yep.
me, and that is still in effect and still going, and people can still contribute to that, right?
We are still taking contributions
Yep.
from state income tax contributors. We have about $3 million left to raise to fully capitalize the fund, and we need to collect that before the end of 2016.
Yeah, okay. And then there's a new program that the federal government has given to all the states.
Correct.
And it's a
Yeah,
Housing Trust
The Housing
Fund.
Trust Fund. So the Housing Trust Fund was actually created in 2008, and it was supposed to be funded through profits from Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac.
Something
However,
happened there.
something happened in 2008, and there
Let
was
me
a
think. What was
meltdown,
it?
maybe, or something.
You got any trivia on that one, Greg?
Yeah, there's nothing trivial about that.
No, there wasn't. But there is a debate whether they actually didn't, whether they needed to get
Put into receivership.
put into conservatorship, receivership, or whatever, that they actually wouldn't have.
Yeah.
They didn't need a bailout. And they probably could have been contributing to the Housing Trust Fund because they gave all their profits to the Treasurer anyway for the last 6 years or whatever. So
In either event, the program was created.
No.
The
But
program
now-
was created, and there was no money
Yeah.
until 2015. That is when the director indicated that they were in a place to start making contributions.
Yeah.
So for the year, any profits for new business from Fannie and Freddie were to be set aside, a small percentage of that, and delivered to HUD come March of 2016. So that did occur. And the Housing Trust Fund was created to have allocations to each state to be used for extremely low income households, mainly for rental. There are some home ownership opportunities there, but mainly when you're dealing with extremely low income, the 30% AMI households, that's the Social Security reliant households. Home ownership really isn't an option. It really is rental and creation of additional units. So our state, small state minimum, we will receive $3 million for that from that fund to be allocated throughout the state. The process is complicated because it is a federal program, so we have to go through a lot of steps to create an allocation plan, which is a plan of how we will distribute those funds. Actually, yesterday we held the final public hearing. We take public comment on all of our plans, and we had our public hearing, so we will submit our plan to HUD for approval. The Housing Trust Fund has several eligible uses, but the main thing is to create units for extremely low-income households. 100% of that $3 million must be spent for those units.
So for the folks that are the most cost burdened,
The
that
most
you talked
cost burdened,
about, and
yep.
the 10% that are below, way below income.
Yes, yep.
Okay.
And, $3 million isn't going to go very far. When you're creating units that can only charge $450 or less for rent, they cannot carry any debt. So we have to get as many resources into those types of units so that they can sustain operating expenses.
Yeah. Okay. So now, but we also have the low-income housing tax credit.
Yes.
You're going to combine the use of those two together.
The plan is, because North Dakota is going to focus those funds to create permanent supportive housing units, which are units that are set aside for folks that need services such as the elderly, Meals on Wheels, case management, household assistance, any type of that. And then to those that are struggling with mental illness or physical disabilities that need some assistance in some of their day-to-day activities. So that's the permanent supportive housing type unit. So our projects that will score higher, because all of our allocation plans are competitive, will be those that are creating units for permanent supportive housing.
Okay.
The federal tax credit program is extremely competitive because, again, we receive the small state minimum, meaning we can fund between 4 or 5 projects a year. The Housing Trust Fund will simply be a gap filler for those particular projects so that they can carry no debt and really support those 30% households.
Okay. What do you think is going to be the biggest struggle with making this housing trust fund work in the state?
I would say one, cost of construction to build those units. Yes, that's going to be a challenge.
Is it, or do you anticipate most of those units going into the 5 larger communities probably?
Likely
Because of the service
the service aspect, services is it's challenging in North Dakota to get services to all the places of needs because Department of Human Services is under some pretty tight budget constraints, and it costs a lot of money to have individual case services provided to households.
Yeah. Okay. So you had a public hearing, Greg. You didn't go.
I did not.
Do you want to voice any of your opinions now?
My opinion is
She's
we
here.
need it.
Okay, all right.
How's that?
I can try.
That would have been a very simple comment to make. So,
Well, I've been on the governor's housing task force for a couple of years and the Bismarck-Mandan housing task force. And to quote a politician, those kinds of needs are just big black holes that you try to fill and know you never will, but work your hardest to get it done.
yeah, okay, all right. Okay, Jennifer, so what else about the trust fund, the housing incentive fund, anything else you want to add before we go on break?
Before we go on break,
Yeah.
there's always so much to say, but we're looking forward to the first funding round, which will be in September for our federal tax credit and housing trust fund, so we can see what kind of projects are coming through and make tweaks for future to make sure the needs that
So
are
any
being met.
interested developers out there, go to our
They
website.
should go to our website, ndhfa.org.
Okay, all
Check
right.
us out.
Okay, we'll be back on the Dakota Housing Network. Oh, back in the USA with Chuck Berry.
Right now, 66.
On Twitter, Facebook, online, and YouTube. supertalk1270.com.
That's Jim Walsh on the vocals, folks. Spirit of America with the Beach Boys. I didn't know you played with the Beach Boys, Jim.
Well,
Yeah, pretty good.
yeah.
Good stuff.
This is a hot rod song, actually.
It is.
Oh, the Craig Breedlove Jet Cars. This is a tribute to the Spirit of America line.
Yeah, okay. All right, we're back on the Dakota Housing Network. Dave Flohr, Jim Walsh on the board, and Greg Larson. You're one of our experts. Along
Okay.
with me, they claim. That's what the
That's
promo
what the title
claims.
says.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we have the real expert in the room, Jennifer Henderson from North
Absolutely.
Dakota
Thank you.
Housing. We're talking rental, multifamily housing today. But Greg, I'm on the edge of my seat, literally. Okay.
More trivia? All right.
Okay.
Well, here's an interesting one. We talked about it prior. We're talking about music, but here's a one-hit wonder. Was published today. Margaret Mitchell's "Gone with the Wind." It's the only novel she ever published.
Okay, it was a good one.
It's the only one she ever needed to publish.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good one.
She was a journalist and who went back to journalism. She actually wrote it from a sickbed. She
Oh.
was ill and recovering from I don't know what.
Okay.
They didn't say. And then here you go, 1950.
Okay.
Harry the Truman, the buck stops here, Truman.
Yep. Okay.
On this day in 1950, Harry sent training troops to Korea.
Uh-oh, that started something. Okay. All right. Okay, so we are back talking rental, multifamily housing
Yes.
with Jennifer here. Jennifer, something we wanted to talk about, I think, was across the state, there's a lot of older rental housing in rural areas, probably in
Yes.
particular.
Yep.
They're aged, to put it politely. What's the concerns with that?
A number of them. Our federal tax credit program, as we said before, started 30 years ago. So we have some properties that are 30 years old there. So rehab starts needed to happen around year 15. The big projects, roof, windows, and such. Same thing with these rural development properties that are in our smaller communities that are much needed housing. Most of them have rental assistance to target those extremely low income households in our rural communities, oftentimes senior households, those that need just an apartment living, getting out of their home but wanting to stay in their community. So what we need to look to is our resources are limited both with rural development and our federal and state resources. So we need to get them together and make plans of how we're going to decide what properties need rehab because they're still needed in those communities, how much, and how are we going to finance them. Our federal tax credit program is really geared towards larger projects, and that's just because of the expense it takes. We need large national equity investors to buy into those projects. There's not a lot of interest nationally in projects that are 8 units located in some of our rural communities. So we need to find alternative methods to deal with those.
And a lot of these are located in viable communities.
They are.
You know,
I
like
mean,
a
you've got
Linton,
Steele, Linton, Strasburg. That's my
Yeah,
home area, so I can name off
You
more,
know those,
more
yeah.
of those. But I mean, any small community that's still Rugby, Devil's Lake, they qualify and have rural development properties that are aged.
So we're not talking about the
We are not talking about
the
Cole
Hamer-
or Judd or
Hamer, Peak, and Tolna neighborhood necessarily. It's some real viable communities that we certainly, you know, I mean, Steele. How many people probably live in Steele and work here?
Yes, it
you
is
know?
a commuter community, so there is
Yeah.
a need in that area.
Yeah.
You know, and you look at Linton, for example, they have a pipeline coming, so
Yeah.
that community has been
Yeah.
inundated with workers. The housing is starting to go up. We need to really protect our affordable units that are located in that community.
Yeah. So, and it's hard to go out and for somebody who would be interested in fixing a place up. It's just pure hard for them to go out and be able to. Okay, I got to
Finance
fix this
that,
up.
yeah.
I got to spend this much money, and I can't rent them for.
Well,
that
and
much.
some of those rural properties, they were created by a community development corporation, volunteers that are now in their 80s. They really don't want to own a property anymore.
Yeah.
So we need to look at partnering with some of our nonprofit developers who have an interest in rural communities and have a mission to help low and extremely low income households.
Yeah.
And
Because it's gonna cause a problem down the road because the people that are living there now, okay, are fine, but if it's seniors, at some point they're going to pass away, and if that apartment is not in good shape, et cetera, that next person that maybe would be thinking about it, they're going to say, I don't want to live in that place because
yes,
it's
I mean,
not in good
they,
shape. So
they
I'm
are
gonna move to
deteriorating.
Bismarck.
Exactly. So if you want to keep folks in their communities, and oftentimes they can, we need to do some rehab.
Because all that does, that continues to put pressure on the Bismarck, Fargo, Grand Forks, Minot, Dickinson, Williston housing situation.
You're right, and it's hard to get a handle on exact needs of affordable units in our state. You know, we had a 2012 statewide housing needs assessment done. That assessment back then said we needed an average of 3,000 affordable units created each year for the next 10 years. That takes us through 2025. And of
That
course
was based on oil, though.
there was a lot of oil. So, in order to prove need for continued state programs and our need for additional resources, we are updating that 2012 needs assessment. It'll be released at actually next week we're hoping for next week. And we really do anticipate showing a need for affordable units throughout the state because those markets are tight and there's a lot of folks that cannot find housing. They're the severely cost burdened households.
So there that 3,000. How many units?
Affordable units, 3,000.
And we got to what point?
A housing
Based on
incentive
that.
fund alone created some 2,000 units, but only about 1,900 of them were affordable.
Okay.
And that was since 2011.
Okay, so you got a little bit over halfway there, which you could say on the market rate side they went over, but on the affordable you couldn't.
We still need
do
help.
enough.
Yeah, and a use of the housing incentive fund is buy down of debt. So you can take a look at some of these market rate properties that are in communities that are fully mortgaged, and perhaps we can buy down some of that debt so that they can add some affordable units into those properties to make them viable again. So again, another continued use for the housing incentive fund.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else you'd like to add?
I can't wait for the study to come out, to be
Yeah.
honest with you, because that's going to be needed to show where we are in North Dakota. There's a lot of talk that we're overbuilt everywhere, but we need to really look at those folks that are served by human services, our age population, our rural properties. All of that information will be included in this study to really gauge where the needs are.
Yeah, it'd be to see how different it is from the one in 2012
Right.
numbers, and see, okay, has it changed much or not? And okay, Greg, you've been a little bit involved in locally in Bismarck, Manning with housing task force and that, and you said Nancy Dykart from the president of the local realtor association, not president but executive officer.
Yeah.
She was on the local task force, and Bismarck's really kind of finding similar type issues, right?
Yeah, I don't think it's any different anywhere. You go to these meetings and you hear of all the folks who are challenged that can only afford $450, and then that's a crying need. And like we said, that's not going to go away. That's this new study is going to show. Yeah, they're still here. They haven't moved. One of the other things, the housing study I was on, task force with the Chamber of Commerce, and I think we're going to pick up again. It's just sort of gone on hold as people have moved on, and
we've had some flux in personnel
changes. But we looked at all these things, and we identified 4 different areas that have housing needs, and we've talked about 2 of them. The other one is the transitory housing needs. It would be the oil workers that come and follow the oil play. They don't tend to live here, but they need housing. And the other one we talked about was those folks who want to have home ownership but cannot buy a home that their income is not going to allow them to buy a $250,000 home. So what are we going to do for entry-level housing? Because there's a huge demand for it. It's getting stronger all the time. And that's kind of what we took a look at. And there's a pilot plan going on now in Grand Forks. It's been very successful in other states, where it's a land grant, where a nonprofit,
land trust,
they own the property. So your $40,000 to $60,000 costs for your lot isn't there, and so you can build a house on that you can afford. The land stays with the profit, but you own your home and you earn and benefit by the equity that you build in the house.
There's a lot of work needs to be done.
And
the housing study will help with that.
Lots of stuff.
Jennifer, thank you very much for coming in today.
Thank you for having me.
On the 4th of July weekend. Happy 4th to everybody. And Greg, are we having a guest next week from Dickinson?
We hope so.
Okay, all right.
We hope so.
Okay, and we'll talk about the Dickinson market and see what's really happening out there in Dickinson.
Okay,
because everything's left.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, apparently. So anyway, Jim, you're having a victory at sea.
Yeah, the great theme from the TV series, Richard Rogers.
Okay.
For your Independence Day.
I did not know that was
His dad,
before.
he was a Navy man.
All right.
91 today, you said.
Yes.
Jim's dad is 91.
Happy birthday,
World
Jim's
War II
dad.
veteran.
Uncle Billy,
All right.
happy birthday.
Okay, thanks everybody. We'll see you again on Dakota Housing Network.